Car salesman of Reddit. What's the most outrageous thing anyone has done while out on a test drive? Friend story. A customer took a Mazda sedan for a test drive and midway pulled over and asked to swap with the salesman to experience the car from the passenger's seat. Just as they were about to drive off again, he says he feels sick and can't go on, and thanks for his time. Turns out he just wanted a lift into town. Smart. I had a dirty looking guy with long, greasy hair want to test drive a Cadillac. We had a pre-planned route for test drives, but he turned the opposite way out of the dealership and told me he wanted to go his own way. At this point, he was acting somewhat strange, like nothing specific, just odd mannerisms. We drove a couple miles and I started getting a bit scared that I was going to be on the 6 o'clock news, when suddenly he pulled into an ice cream place. He bought us both ice cream cones and we ate them as he checked out the engine. Then we drove back and he left. It was nice. Not a salesman, but once I went to a Mazda dealership to test drive an RX-8. The salesman was a talkative dude, and to make conversation I asked him what was the craziest thing he's seen on the job. He told me he let a guy test drive an RX-8 as well and that the dude absolutely loved it. Before buying it though, he had to go show his mom to see if she would approve. Dude asked the salesman, "Can I go show this to my mom to see if she approves?" Salesman said of course. The dude doesn't come back after a few hours, so the salesman calls him up and the dude lets him know he's on his way to New Orleans to show his mom. The dealership was in South Texas. The dude shows up a day or so later and buys the car. Salesman is relieved because he would have been fired and then some. He probably spent in gas what he paid for the car. I own one. They're thirsty. Used car dealer in NJ here. I was selling a 2006 Honda Odyssey XL and the only info I get before a test drive is a driver's license and a phone number. The guy said he knew the area, so I'll let him go alone cause we were short staffed. I told him to keep it short. This jackass is gone for 3 hours and ignoring my phone calls. I was about to call the police but I decided to give him another half hour. He finally came back and the van was filled with groceries and some crap from Home Depot. I was P and he knew it. I'll never forget what he said. "I know you're P, but before you say anything, I'll buy it." I laughed and held firm on the price, which he didn't seem to have a problem with. Grocery bag test can make it or break it. Clearly that car aced the test. I had a car salesman start crying on me when I told him I was still looking and not going to buy the car that day. He broke down and cried. A 30-year-old man. He excused himself and went to see his manager, came back and cried some more. He said he thought we connected and was sure I was going to buy the car. This is funny, but it also reinforces how stressful car sales is. You don't sell, you don't eat. Kind of on topic. My girlfriend used to manage an enterprise and she said an old woman brought a car back with the front completely destroyed and her explanation was that the gate at her development wouldn't open, so she rammed it. It still didn't open, so she rammed it 2 more times. She forgot that the rental car didn't have the little tag that opens the gate and no one was around to let her in. So, she rammed it. From what I'm told, she was very nonchalant about it. I do security in a gated community. I deal with these idiots all the time. A couple of years ago I go to buy a car. At the beginning of the drive I can tell the car salesman isn't looking so well. He's looking a bit loopy and pale. About halfway through the drive he yells for me to pull over. As I stop he opens the door and pukes all over the ground and the inside of the door. The last 10 minutes in that car were the most awkward and worst smelling moments of my life. Oh man, it's too bad you two couldn't laugh about it. Not the salesman, but the buyer. In 1989, I took a new Nissan for a test drive. I think his was a 240 SX, but I can't remember for sure. This was in a small town in Louisiana, and at the time, you could go on a test drive without a salesman in the car. I drove it about 5 minutes away to show my then GF. On the way back, as I was passing underneath an overpass, doing around 40 miles per hour, a drunk in an old Ford pickup truck blew through a stop sign and slammed into me. I tried to steer away from him at the last second to avoid it, but it was almost a T-bone. The car rolled twice and had most of the passenger side ripped off. I can remember watching the world spin around in slow motion as broken glass flew through the air. Thank God I was wearing a seatbelt. The car rolled twice but ended up back on 4 wheels. The funny thing was, this was one of the cars that talked to you, and even though the car was ripped to shreds, it kept telling me that my key was in the ignition. I took an ambulance ride to the hospital to get checked out, and they brought the car back to the dealership in a paper bag. How great would it be if it was still drivable and you rolled up to the dealership in that wreck? Thankfully this did not happen to me. It was one of my salesmen I hired in the past. He had a guy test drive a S500 Mercedes, only a few years old at the time. He let the gentleman and his wife have it alone, which happens frequently at highline dealerships. They returned 45 minutes later, a bit of a long test drive. They said the check engine light popped on and the ABS light, and they were scared of the car and left. Come to find out, they removed some $2,500 worth of parts to fix their S500 at a repair shop a few miles away. Thankfully they were found out and caught. I work at a used dealership. We sell all types of vehicles, but our most popular vehicle in this area is a full-size pickup. We always have at least 5 or 10. Early the 2nd of December years ago, we had a dude come in and he was looking around at our cars. He said he was interested in a Focus wagon and wanted to take it for a test drive. No problem, man. Have a good time. He came back about 45 minutes later, said it wasn't what he was looking for, and rushed off. I went to put the car away and noticed it smelled like pine. The butthole loaded a Christmas tree in the back and took it home, then brought our car back. Why couldn't he have just used a truck? I let the car business a long time ago, but one customer will be forever seared into my brain. She came in to trade her 6-year-old car in on a new Ford Explorer. I got the car ready and pulled it around front. She climbed in and carefully pulled out into traffic. She asked if we could run an errand. I said sure. We drove to a house a few minutes away. She got out, took a small bag out of her purse and placed a used feminine product on the windshield of a car in the driveway. Got back in the car and said frick that hoe. We drove away. She bought the car and was gone a couple hours later. I will never be the same. Former salesperson here. Probably the craziest would be this guy suddenly yelled, "Let's test out the 4-wheel drive." He veered off the road near the dealership and cut donuts in a muddy field. I didn't really give a crap if he damaged the truck because that's what insurance and lawyers are for. I just felt bad for the underpaid guys in the back who had to clean it back up. The only time I ever got upset with someone and told them to pull the frick over was this old man was test driving a brand new 2008 Corvette. This guy couldn't drive a manual for crap. He could barely get it out of the parking space, but he managed to get enough momentum to start rolling toward the road, and I noped the frick out. Former salesman here. Most outrageous would have to be almost killing me getting on the freeway and not yielding right of way to an 18-wheeler. This old bag was so close I had to grab the wheel to prevent my death. I've noticed that seniors like to think they automatically have the right of way in any situation, like their age gives them a VIP membership to the road. This is a bit different from most of the stories on here. This guy showed up in a flashy Maserati and wanted to test drive a new Nissan. I don't even remember what it was, maybe an SUV or something. He drove it to an ATM and withdrew like $200. Then he just gave it to me. That was kind of weird and I wasn't really sure what to do with it. I tried to refuse it, but he was insistent. He said it was a tip and just wanted to make sure I was taken care of. We went back and he said he would have someone be in touch to complete the purchase. My manager was trying to get him to stay and just buy it now. The guy broke down and started yelling at my manager about how his son had just died and he had a bunch of other things he needed to do. This was all a long time ago, so I don't really remember the details. I was in my early 20s at the time, maybe only 20 or 21. Probably about the same age as any kids this guy would have had. I reported the money he gave me because I didn't really know what else to do with it and didn't want it to become an issue if he told other people later. I figured we'd just apply it to the purchase or something. My manager told me to just keep it. He never ended up buying the car and I never heard from him again. Kind of a weird experience, all things considered. I sold cars for years and that was the only time someone ever gave me extra money, especially for not buying a car, and the only time I saw someone yelling at a manager in the showroom. $1,000 bet you reminded him of the kid he had. Something somewhere he was trying to make rights in his soul. Took a woman on a test drive. She backed into a fence while turning the car around to go back to the dealership. and when I had to go report it to management when we returned, there was damage. She denied it and quickly jumped into her car and left. That and the guy who just pulled out slowly into 4 lanes of traffic without looking. I've had some fun ones, but those two stick in my memory. Had a guy show up on a fairly nice Harley Davidson without a shirt on. Nobody helped him, so I offered to. He wanted to drive one of our top end cars. $320k Rolls Royce Ghost. I got a service bag, the ones that protect the seats from the mechanic's grime, and let him drive it. We got up to about 140 miles per hour on a public road before I told him he needed to buy it before hitting 150 miles per hour. We went back to the dealership. He went to his bike and wrote us a check. We delivered the car to his house that night and has been buying cars from the dealership ever since. He's also purchased a 2014 Porsche 911 Turbo S, Maserati Gran Turismo MC Stradale convertible or Gran Cabriolet depending on where you're from, and an Aston Martin Vanquish. A year or so ago, an old man was test driving an F150, and when we got back to the lot he insisted on backing it into the parking space himself. There was a BMW behind us and it looked like he was going to hit it, so I offered to get out and move it. "I'm not gonna hit it," he said, "so we're getting awful close. Put the vehicle in park for me. I'm not gonna hit the dang car crunch." I basically said, well, there it was, and hopped out. Showed him the damage and he insisted he didn't do it. I think he was just embarrassed and panicked a bit. I would have worked something out with him since the damage wasn't all that bad, but he called me a liar, hopped in his truck and left, so I called the police. He wound up paying a couple $100 for the damage. BMW. Crunch. Couple $100 for the damage. Lies. Not my story, but at a local Nissan dealer in Queens, 2 very large and intimidating men took a test drive with a salesperson and drove him to the hole, an area off the parkway that is literally a hole. They told him to get out and the car was never recovered. He never got it before taking the drive and lost his job as a result. I always thought it was funny when people would get really offended when I would ask for their driver's license before a test drive. We had to photocopy it and leave it with our manager and would shred them when we got back. I mean, there are so many reasons, like the one you mention, but also just to make sure the person is legally allowed to drive. Also, it was required by our insurance. I was showing a car to a guy one day. When I went to go get something, he had opened the hood to look at the engine bay, and he had closed it before I got back. Well, while we were driving on the interstate, sure enough, the hood flew open because he hadn't latched it all the way. It smashed into the windshield, shattering it. We were going really fast, and all of a sudden we couldn't see anything at all. I thought we were goners, but somehow he made it off the road without any further incident. I was also offered sex in a car by an attractive older woman, but didn't do it. Turned down someone's idea of a letter to penthouse. Took the car for a test drive, made a music video with it. It's Friday, gotta get down on Friday. We had a brand new 2014 Audi S4, and it was right after a snowstorm. The kid test driving it was younger, and came with cash. We were going for a normal test drive when he went into an open hospital parking lot. At that point he proceeded to turn off the traction control and start doing donuts as I hold onto the oh crap handle for my life. After telling him to stop well over 10 times, he stopped and I kicked him out of the driver's seat and drove back. After getting screamed at by our GM, he ended up buying the car. Needless to say, he scared the crap out of me. Could have been worse. This sounds like a legitimate test drive. Not a dealer, but I had my wife do this. It shocked me and the dealer. So we're looking at full-size cars and we look at the trunk. My wife says, "Wow, you could hide a couple bodies in there," he says. "Yeah, maybe." Without warning she climbs in, lays down and says, "Yeah, you sure can. We'll take it." I looked at him and said, "We're newlyweds." His shocked face lost all color and became even more exaggerated. He said, "Oh, well, looks like you got you a winner." The entire time my wife is laying in the trunk rolling and saying, "Heck, I bet we could get 3 in here." I test drove a sports car once and the salesman kept telling me to step on the gas so that I could get a good sense of the power. After ignoring him a couple times, he put his hand on my thigh and pressed my leg down into the accelerator. I instinctively backhanded him with a closed fist and gave him a bloody nose. The rest of the test drive was pretty awkward. Don't frick with the driver. He's driving. You have been visited by futility, doggo. Life is a dark, yawning void of nothingness. You will ultimately find what you personally identify as solace in conspiracy theories and reruns of Scrubs to distract you from the fact that you will die alone and be forgotten. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.